Hello and welcome to today's webinar, which is the third in Entwistle Power's webinar series. On behalf of my business partner Julie Entwistle and I, thank you for joining us. Today I will talk about acquired brain injury and how occupational therapists aim to get people thinking, doing, and managing better in their daily lives. So I have decided to split the webinar into 3 sections for ease of watching in case you need to take a break and come back later to continue watching the series. In the first section, I will briefly go through the agenda and then touch on the definition of acquired brain injury and then get into some of the symptoms and the functional impacts of their injuries. In the second section of the webinar, I'll talk about how occupational therapists can help through thinking strategies and with management of some of the physical health and emotional symptoms that many of our clients experience. And thirdly, in the last section, we'll talk about the importance of a client-centered approach to assessment and treatment, and then get into a case example and end off with the references that we've used for today's webinar. So then, what is acquired brain injury? The World Health Organization describes ABI as damage to the brain which occurs after birth and is not related to a congenital or a degenerative change. These impairments may be temporary or permanent and cause partial or functional disability or psychosocial maladjustment. Brain injury is sudden physical damage to the brain. A major cause of head trauma is motor vehicle accidents. So let's talk about the symptoms of acquired brain injury. The cognitive or thinking, behavioral or doing, or physical changes that may result from ABI depend on the areas of the brain that are injured. For example, the diagram is showing the frontal lobe in blue. The frontal lobe is responsible for a set of cognitive skills including formulating goals, problem solving, anticipating the consequences of actions, planning, and organization. Therefore, damage to this area of the brain could present as deficits in these areas of function, such as difficulty thinking through situations and difficulty making choices. The injury may be confined to a small area of the brain, which is otherwise known as focal brain damage, or to several areas of the brain, which is otherwise known as diffuse brain injury. So then, let's talk about some of the cognitive symptoms of brain injury that we see when working with our clients. The way the injury presents itself varies based on the areas of the brain that are affected, and a comprehensive assessment is needed to determine the symptoms present. Cognitive or thinking symptoms are almost always present and may include things such as difficulties with memory or the ability to acquire, store, retain, and later retrieve information. We may also see decreased attention or the ability to focus on one thing while ignoring other things that may be going on at the same time. You may also see that your clients have reduced information processing speed, which may present itself as a feeling of slowness and affects how information is taken in and subsequently learned. Individuals may present with issues of insight and self-awareness. They may not recognize, for example, that they have any cognitive impairments at all, which could lead to safety risks if this individual then goes on about their activities in the same way that they did prior to their injury. For example, if they're using power tools when they're struggling with attention or fatigue. You may also see executive functioning issues, and executive function affects problem solving and decision making as we previously discussed, and you may observe people having difficulties thinking through situations, understanding problems, generating solutions, or making choices on a daily basis. And finally, individuals may also present with cognitive communication difficulties, which are often addressed by a speech-language pathologist. How then do we see these cognitive difficulties impacting function with our clients? A person with acquired brain injury may be unable to or have difficulty planning, organizing, or even initiating tasks. They may have problems paying attention to conversations, coming up with the right word, or taking information in. You may notice this as restlessness and distractibility, poor memory, difficulty with decision-making, or confusion. And due to these difficulties, the individual may no longer be able to perform at work or school and may need some accommodations for these difficulties, such as a note taker in the classroom, extra time for test taking, or a reduced or modified work schedule, for example. They may have difficulties completing activities at home, such as remembering what to buy at the grocery store or recalling how to cook a favorite meal, let alone being able to attend to the task once they start it. The individual may no longer be able to drive, as their cognitive symptoms could impact their safety, such as paying attention to the road signs, obeying road rules, and so forth. Due to cognitive communication difficulties, they may also struggle to read, write, or even carry on conversations. And please take note that this is not an exhaustive list, as each individual with brain injury presents itself quite uniquely. So those were the cognitive symptoms. So let's touch base on the emotional symptoms of brain injury then. Common emotional symptoms of brain injury may include anxiety, depression or low mood, personality changes, impulsivity, irritability, low frustration tolerance, and becoming easily angered, and apathy. It's important for you to do a comprehensive assessment and identify and address symptoms early on, especially if the person has some pre-existing mental disorder, which increases their risk to develop major depressive disorder or anxiety disorder later on. Do these emotional difficulties then impact the function of our clients? From an emotional perspective, the client with an acquired brain injury may show emotional or behavioral outbursts, for example, which can impact their performance at school or at work. They may be socially isolated due to difficulties with social interaction as a result of mood, anxiety, or aggression. Their previous social circles may actually exclude them from post-injury activities, or the individual may no longer enjoy activities that they previously did, such as group or social activities. Aggression, impulsivity, or changes to personality may result in altercations with the law or carelessness about safety. Low mood and depression symptoms may include decreased motivation, such as difficulty getting up in the morning, and you may notice a lack of regard for self-care or taking a shower and getting dressed, for example. And in severe cases, the client may report to you that they want to end their life. Commonly, an individual has been involved in a motor vehicle accident as the cause of their ABI, may have difficulty or inability to walk in the community or to drive due to anxiety, such as pedestrian or driver anxiety. Okay, so now let's talk about the physical symptoms of a brain injury. Common physical symptoms of ABI could include difficulty sleeping and fatigue, headaches at the site of the injury, seizures, muscle paralysis and weakness, dizziness or impaired balance and coordination, fine motor or oral motor coordination difficulties, visual deficits, nausea or vomiting, tinnitus, or otherwise known as ringing in the ears, and noise and light sensitivity. Once again, these deficits are varied and typically depend on the area of the brain that has been injured. How some of these physical challenges impact the function of the clients that we're working with. From a physical standpoint, the individual may present with a variety of functional challenges depending on their injury combined with their unique environment and their functional goals. Due to decreased control, muscle weakness, or restricted range of motion, for example, amongst other physical challenges, the individual may have reduced independence carrying out some of their functional tasks, such as walking, feeding, eating, and dressing, in addition to some higher level of activities of daily living, such as cooking, banking, school, and work. This can impact an individual's attention and focus in conversations socially, at work, or at school. Balance, vestibular, or visual deficits may pose a safety risk in crowded areas or even in the home. Due to these symptoms, it may be determined that the individual is unsafe to operate a motor vehicle. They may no longer be able to use a computer due to fine motor coordination or visual deficits. Difficulties that result are therefore widely varied, and this is by no means a comprehensive list. So that's it for part one. Thanks for joining us. In section two, I will be talking about how occupational therapists help with thinking strategies and the management of these physical and emotional symptoms that we've just discussed. For information on Entwistle Power Occupational Therapy, you can follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. We also have a very active blog, which you can access on our website, entwistlepower.com, which has a lot of information, tips, and strategies for daily living. In addition to this, we have a very cool occupational therapy video series, which we've called OTV, which shares more OT solutions for living. And we've just released an AODA customer service training program, which is the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, and be sure to check that as well.